Well, good morning, everyone. Please be welcome to seminar, the Venezuelan migrant and refugees route towards autonomy in Brazil. I am Thais Braga. I am the manager of project Welcome by Means of Labor, initiative of other partners which are promoting this event today with AVSI Brazil. We're very happy to count on your participation here, both presential and virtual. And I'd like to send you a message. We made available, besides the Portuguese and English and Italian channels, for those who are following this event remotely, as well as presentially in here. Well, this event has as an objective to share the results of the final assessment of a project Welcome by Means of Labor, which indicate the route of the autonomy of Venezuelans in Brazil. But also, we have the objective to share a reading of how the process of interiorization is a right and sustainable strategy. Now, I'd like to invite to come to the stage the following guests. Bertha Macaroon, please. She is a political scientist and technical director of policy research. Joanna Lane, political associate at the U.S. Embassy in Brazil. José Egas, representative of the UN Agency for Refugees in Brazil, ACNUR. Diogo Costa, Manager of Human Resources at Macodesk Construction and Incorporation, and Bárbara Pereira dos Cravos, Technical Analyst of Social Policies of the Special Advisory for Migration Affairs at the Ministry of Citizenship. We have one other guest who will come to join us later on. Well, our event, I will start with a brief presentation over project Welcome by Means of Labor, and right after we'll have an exposition from Bertha over the results of the evaluation, the final evaluation of project Welcome by Means of Labor. This presentation is based on a scientific study that was carried out on the field this year that will focus especially in the process of interiorization of Venezuelans in the route of, towards autonomy in their journey in Brazil. After that, our guests will participate of a round of questions, commenting a few issues related to the topic, and finally we'll have a moment of conclusion which will be carried out by our Avsi Brazil, Fabrício Pericelli. Now I will share with all of you a little bit over the project Welcome by Means of Labor. Well, before we start talking about the project specifically, I'd like to tell who is Avsi, because maybe a few people are not informed about our organization. AVSI Brazil is an NGO created in 2007 to contribute for the improvement of life conditions of people who live in the situation of vulnerability. And we work connected to the international context by means of a partnership with the AVSI Foundation. Well, our mission is to make people who are in the situation of vulnerability or who are in a context of humanitarian emergency, protagonists of their own development of their family and community by means of specific and social projects in different areas. AVSI actually acts in several areas, as you can see here. Among them, the area of Venezuelan migration, and we are working currently in 11 states and in the federal district with 26 projects currently on the field. We have 600 collaborators, being that most of them is in the state of Roraima, working with Venezuelan humanitarian emergency, working with more than 460,000 beneficiaries with a social investment of 74 million reais. Now I will tell more specifically about the project Welcome by Means of Labor. AVSI started working in this Venezuelan migration in June of 2018 in the scope of Operation Welcome with the management of some shelters in the state of Roraima. By then, AVSI collaborators noticed that people who came out of the shelters many times presented demands and needs that sometimes were in a very vulnerable situation when they went to other places. So AVSI, together with their partners and the foundation and within the scope of Operation Welcome, developed a pilot project of interiorization in the state of Bahia, together with the San Miguel industry, to interiorize Venezuelans by means of labor. This was a very successful experience in which from all people hired, only one of them left. So this experience was in 2018. And besides this, AVSI understood this was a sustainable, interesting model that could be scaled up. So Avsi developed this project, Welcome by Means of Labor, which has two main objectives. One objective is to ease access to formal labor for these Venezuelan refugees and migrants in Brazil, and also to serve the Brazilian vulnerable population, and to ease socioeconomic integration of this population of Venezuelans in Brazilian cities by means of volunteer interiorization by means of work, labor. This project is not done only by AVSI Brazil. We have several partners involved in this initiative. We have the AVSI Foundation, which is responsible for the project officially, together with our funder, which is the Department of Refugee and Migration Population of the U.S. government. We have other strategic partners also involved, which is Avsi USA, through the federal government, and other partners which eventually along the way came to us. Operation Welcome has several partners from several fields, from the municipalities, from the federal government, and from states and civil society, UN agencies. And more specifically, with regards to the activities of the project, I think to ease, I share with you that the project is split into four main activities. One of the activities is the strengthening of individual capacities towards autonomy of these Venezuelans. So we give them capacity building courses in Portuguese language over the Brazilian labor market, and professionalizing courses. All activities are carried out within the shelters that AVSI manages in the state of Roraima, in the city of Boa Vista. There are 7 of them. So within 2 years of project, we are just ending the second year of the first stage. We were able to reach 1,065 Venezuelans. We also promoted professionalizing courses for Brazilians, specifically in the region of Salvador, Bahia. We reached 961 Brazilian citizens in the city of Novos Alagados. We have actions of interiorization, which is the heart of the project, by means of a structuring of a sheltering center, or welcoming center. It is the Casa Boa Samaritano. It was structured in a building that was lended by the church in Brazil. It is a very nice place. I invite you to visit. And the interiorization by means of labor for other cities besides the federal district. So up to today, in this axis of interiorization by means of labor, we were able to facilitate the entry of 543 people working formally. And in total, more than 1,100 people were interiorized. So these were 543 people that were hired, and the rest were family members who came to these cities together with these people who were hired. And we also held volunteer actions, both in Roraima and Federal District and Bahia. I'm not going to go any further here. I will talk about the interiorization process so you can understand how it works. This route of interiorization begins with a fundamental actor for us, which is the private sector. Private sector makes feasible this initiative. So we engaged companies of several sectors, of several magnitudes in several cities of Brazil. This project has reached 9 states in Brazil, seeking actively companies which are interested in hiring Venezuelans, or as we received indication of the Operation Welcome, for us to engage them in any process. So we saw the profile of this slot. We matched with these Venezuelans and we make feasible the interviews. The companies do the selection of the profiles they believe to be more adequate, and then the formal hiring of these people. Thereafter, these people go through a checking of documents. They receive a series of information about the cities they will move to, and they sign a term of responsibility, and they are sent to these places. It is important to mention here, it is not written in the project, but this interiorization is volunteer. People opt and decide whether they want this labor offered, or if they want to move to the cities according to their preferences. When these people come to the city, the hired collaborators and their family members start working. They remain together in their family core, and AVSI give them some specific support. We give them a on-site, an individual follow-up with a social assistant or a psychologist during 3 months, which will help these families to access public services in the local or in the region. They will mediate some attention point with the company, and they will facilitate this process of autonomy with these people. We give them some support with housing for 3 months and a support in terms of food supplies, and we also monitor these interiorized families along the path. All of these from the beginning, doing a sensibilization and articulation with the communities. We understand it to be very important to have this dialogue with the municipalities and the networks that will absorb these people. And also, a little bit more specific in regards to this support. As I said before, we give this housing for 3 months. We pay the maintenance of these houses for 3 months. We acquire furniture and basic households for each house, beds, stove, refrigerator, everything that is basic for people to start their lives, because they leave Roraima with nothing. We give the support with food. The so-called food voucher is also important, and this hiring of a social assistant or psychologist for 3 months. Just to give you an idea, this support along 3 months per family will cost about 8,000 reais, except the cost of social assistance. So it is a very important element in our point of view. I will stop over here. I'm not going to go any further because I think today to listen to Bertha is more interesting about her analysis that she made. Bertha is a PhD in political science, is specialized in quantitative and qualitative methods by the University of Michigan. So now I will invite Bertha from Police Research to share the results of her assessment. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you. and also a great challenge to have the opportunity to present the results of a research that we can understand that is unforeseen, because we are doing a monitoring of the interiorization of these families by the project Welcome by Means of Labor. And with this monitoring, we are able to assess to which extent it was successful or not in this process, in this route, as far as to which extent these families, at the end of this period of 3 months after interiorization, in which they are followed up by the project with the rent and food support and social support, to which extent they will be able to go on with their lives in an autonomous fashion. So this was the purpose of our research. We did a very hefty design combining qualitative and quantitative methods. The qualitative methods were used by means of the technique of in-depth interviews. At this moment of the research, we worked with a set of key actors involved in the process of interiorization, members of the federal government, of ACNUR, people from Avis, which are in Boa Vista, as well as in the destination city, in direct contact with this population. And so in this regard, they know very well the dramas and the sufferings and the issues that are placed in there. And also at this moment, we did in-depth interviews with Venezuelan migrants and refugees, both in Boa Vista. At the moment, they were waiting for their interiorization, as well as in the destination cities after interiorization, 3 months after this route. And after this qualitative collection of data, we were able to design a quantitative research to do a combination of methods in a way that through a survey we could get a frequency or a quantification. We were able to measure the most important aspects or hypotheses that we brought up in the qualitative research. So this survey basically was designed to look to the time variable as a mark, as a marker of this interiorization process. We considered 3 different moments which are marked by time. Our 0 time are the people in Boa Vista waiting for the sheltering or waiting for the interiorization. Time 1, which are the people who just finished interiorization. They are in a destination city, but they still need assistance of the project Welcome by Means of Labor. And time 2, these are the people who already finished this 3-month period. So in our case, these are people who were in between 4 and 15 months in the destination cities autonomously after the end of the social assistance of project Welcome by Means of Labor. So we had to do an active search to be able to reach these people in time 2 from the reference list that was given to us by the families that were interiorized by the project. We extracted a sample and we made an active search of these people who were in 18 municipalities of the state of Santa Catarina, Paraná, São Paulo, and Espírito Santo, most of them in Santa Catarina. All details we will make available in our report. Here, this is just a summary of the main findings of this research. Just to give you an idea, what is the labor profile of these people? We'll have here, especially people with high school education, 46.2% of the sample. We'll have people with technical or university degrees, a little over 30% of the population. And people with fundamental education, about 20.7%, and people who never went to school, 1.9% of our sample. When we talk about technical and superior education, the most frequent qualification is administration, electrical engineering, computing science, mechanics, nursing, teaching, accounting, and 89% of these public with a university degree already worked, or they have some experience in other areas of activity. Now, among the 68.8% of the respondents who have high school education, 94% of them had a practical experience in 268 activities, in an average of 2 fields of action or types of activity per respondent. So these are activities in the scope of gastronomy or bricklaying or civil construction helpers were the most mentioned activities. So we're kind of curious to know where did they go 3 months after the interiorization, or after they finished this? Did they remain in their job? Did they leave? Did they go to any other city? If we look territorially wise, 79% of our sample remained in the first destination city. 16% went to a second destination city. They came to the first one, stayed there for 3 months, and after this period, they went to a second city. 4% were already in between 4 and 15 months after the conclusion of the project. 4% were living in a third destination city. In our sample, we didn't have anyone in the fourth city, but we had one case that was in the fifth city. Well, it is a very interesting characteristic that we notice in this route. The first of them, with regards to the composition of the family profile, we have, as these families establish in their destination, we have an increase of the household density. So they establish in their jobs, they felt more secure, and they started attracting and inviting parents and friends to come to the interior in a different modality, because there are other modalities, such as family reunification and social unification. So we see that on time 2 of our research, our average household density is higher. It becomes 4.2%, and it calls our attention that when we look at the distribution of this variable, people per household, we'll see that on time 2, 25% of these households have in between 6 to 16 people living in there, which ends up becoming a strategy to help with the different situations, such as the value of the rent, which is not very cheap for them. So there are situations in which they share this household with other family members, and it becomes a much larger family. In many cases, as we'll see, they share also with other families. And it is interesting because this variable of household density, it is dialoguing directly with the idea of the plans for the future. When we look at these families, more than 80% of them that come to Brazil, they want to bring family members and other people. On time 2, we have an increase in regards to time 0. 87% of them are planning to bring family members or relatives. On time 0 is only 81.0. So there's more uncertainty on time 0, but there is a major will to do so. On time 1, which is that moment when they just came and the expectation is very big and they have full support, the will to bring people is even greater, is 96.4%. And on time 2, we have a certain shock of reality because the program has already finished and these people are already dealing directly with their own reality. So we have statements and interviews in this qualitative interview. One of the social assistants that work at the point says they come with the expectation of the new, of restarting of a place they don't know. Some of them have already researched on the internet, but it is a difficult process, especially because our city is very cold. So in the south of Brazil, they do have this difficulty with the climate. So they have a lot of difficulty to adapt to the cold climate, but in general they come motivated to work, to restart. And the main thing that I notice, it is a key issue, is that either they are here because of family members or they are here to bring their family members. This is kind of standard. Those who are not with family are just waiting to stabilize, to get a house and money to bring the other family members. Well, and then from these interviews, in-depth interviews, we developed a measure of integration in the Brazilian society. To place them from the talks with the refugees and migrants, in which we try to understand what they understand as integration. We see that there is a key variable of this process that is related to the insertion on the labor market, and obviously what leads this idea, this measure of integration, is the economic variable. Of course, there are others, but the strongest variable that leads the idea of this integration is the economic variable. So I believe that the expectations of all migrants go simply for having better life conditions. This is possible with access to labor market in good conditions, not slavery. And we know that by having a labor stability would be the beginning of improvements in these life conditions. This is a statement of a 45-year-old male with higher education, which was awaiting for interiorization in the city of Boa Vista, Roraima. So we worked with the following measure of integration of 3 dimensions. In the economic dimensions, we thought about employability, the family income, and the distance in between the real income of the family and that gain that is considered necessary for the basic expenses. So they earn 1,500, but they calculate they need 250 or 2,500, so they are still short in 1,000 reais until I get my objective, which is to sustain my family. That's the distance. The second dimension is the aspect of the household and access to basic rights. So autonomy of the household space, the president is to leave the shelter and they have an autonomy in a certain space. The presence of children and teenagers from 5 to 17 years at school, access to medical service, and access to social programs made available by the federal government for this public. And in dimension of social capital or social equity, we assess the network of relationships, socialization and new friends, the satisfaction with their lives in Brazil, and the broader, more subjective idea, it is happiness. In the economic dimension, one thing highlights in the analysis when we observe along the time the employability. On time 2, we'll have almost 95.9% of the families interiorized, which are not connected to the program anymore. 95% of them have, at least one of them is working. So you will have only 4.1% of these households on time 2 in which there was no one working in the family. And when we look, for example, on time 2 to the set of respondents, we'll see that 77.6% of them were working with a formal contract. And in the scope of the respondents, because this first variable is looking the scope of the family as a whole. And there we're looking in the scope of only one respondent. Among the respondents, 14.3% of them were still looking for a job. So that is the national rate of development or of an unemployment, very similar to the national rate of unemployment. And they had only 2% of mothers that were working exclusively in the household spectrum. So this is a movement that we notice along this time. Families become denser, more people in the families start working, and the mothers will leave the domestic scene, and some of their children will be at school, and they will have the possibility to also get into the labor market. So we did in-depth interviews with the human resources of the companies, and this one, for example, is the statement of an agro-industry in the state of Santa Catarina. Most of the couples we have make this this exchange in shifts. For example, who works at night, who works during the day, especially now in the pandemic, during the pandemics in which daycare and school is only half a shift. So they have to relay taking care of children. And in the middle of the afternoon, when they come to work, they go get the children, and they'll have to pay anyone to take care of the children. So they relay different shifts with this objective. Family income along this route. It is growing. On time 0, the average income will be almost 62% of the family arrangements will have no income in the city of Boa Vista. They're not able to access the labor market. That's why the average income is very low, about 331 reais. On time 1, the average income will go to 1,870 reais, and on time 2, we'll have about 2,240 reais, almost 43, the average income of this arrangement. So you see, the movement is you come, you establish yourself, other people are attracted to your to the interior of that nuclear by family reunion or reunification, by family reunification or social reunion. And with this, the average income will increase because we have more people working. And our average, that will say it's about 50% of our sample is making up to 2,050 reais on time 2, and 50% of them, I will say the maximum value was about 5,000 reais. Now, when we think that projected family income considered to be necessary for the basic sustainment, we'll have 3 times, because in the city of Boa Vista, the average projection of 2,400 reais that we believe to be necessary for the household. On time 1, it becomes 2,800, and on time 2, also 2,800. So in this range of almost 3,000 reais, which would be a realistic projection for these families in that second moment after interiorization. So these are very, very close averages, considering that there is a difference in the city of Boa Vista, but not significant or statistically significant on time 2. Now, when we look at the difference in between average family income and what he really needs to reach survival, we see that this goes down along the time, because in the city of Boa Vista, they are in a situation in which this is the zero ground. I mean, there is a distance in between the average, what is necessary and what is real on time 1 in the first 3 months of the interiorization. They calculate their average to be 2,836 reais, and the real one is 1,870, so there is a difference of 960 reais. That is the distance they need to reach in between what they make and what they need to make. But it is important to mention also that when we look at the distribution, and these data are in detail at the report, we'll see that on time 2, the third quarter of this distribution, about 25% of these families who make more money, they already overcame their objective, because this is just the average, okay? So when I mentioned this issue that they overcame, you see, for example, what they think about their own income. On time 2, we'll have almost 27%, which already calculate the income to be enough or almost enough for the family, and 55% believe that not always it is enough. Those who say that the income is never enough goes down to 17.3% in time 2. And when we compare this with time 0 in the city of Boa Vista, we'll see that in Boa Vista, 85.5% believe that this income will never be enough. So there is a trajectory that is being traced here. And another aspect is that on time 2, we already have 56% of the families who can already choose the best labor opportunities. They are already in a situation in which they can choose and not just accept the first or any offer of labor that is made to them. So this proportion on time 2 is about 14% only that feel in condition to choose. On time 1 is 43%, and on time 2 is 56%. Now, we made a regression model, and I'll explain what it is. We wanted to keep under control a set of variables which weight in the income. They matter in the income. For example, education level, time in Brazil in terms of months. Believe that. Look, he's been in Brazil for 50 months. The other one came only 2 months ago. This will influence the income. The gender, being male or female, the number of people working in that household. So these are variables that intuitively we understand to have an impact over the family income. But we wanted to know what is the weight of each one of these variables in this family income. So we made a regression model to do that. Since the distribution of this income is not normal, we ended up working with the natural logarithm of the variable. But I'll try to explain to you what it means. What is the weight of each one of these variables in the family income? I'll start down here, months in Brazil. It was not significant. What does it say? Well, it says that keeping under control the project, the markers of the project, the school level, education level, gender, the number of people, the time in months in Brazil is not significant because being in Boa Vista, where the access to labor market is very scarce, they can stay there for 50 months and it will not have an impact in the family income. So you see that this result is actually it supports the program of interiorization. It gives us the idea that I need to leave that territory in which 50% of the GDPs depends on the public employment, where the opportunities of employment and incorporation of the market are very small. I need to seek other territories in which these possibilities are greater. School education level, to have a negative coefficient. What does it say? It is something that we mentioned in the research in Boa Vista. Unfortunately, education level is not a variable that at this moment helps the Venezuelan migrants and refugees to help to get into the labor market. Because the type of insertion that is necessary at this moment, it happens in employment, which does not demand any qualification or any school or education level. Unfortunately, school level has a negative coefficient in this regression. That is, to have a higher degree does not mean an increase in family income. Now, when we think right up there, when we think about time one, the moment when they leave Boa Vista to the destination city, in regards to time zero, then we have an impact of about 178%, an increase of 177% over the income, family income. And on time two, in regards to the time in Boa Vista, this increase is 180% over the family income. That is, keeping everything under control, we're isolating the effect of the program in this marker of time of the project Welcome by Means of Labor. And when we think the number of people working, the more people who work in the household, it will increase the family income in about 32%. Now, being male or female matters in an increase of about 22% over the family income. So that was the economic dimension. Now we'll talk about the dimension of the household and access to services. We'll have at the end of this route on time two, 76% of the respondents were in a rented house for them and for their families, living with their families, and 23% are sharing with third families. On time one, they are still supported by the project, so the project actually pays the rent. And on time zero, they are in the shelter. So the important thing is to look at time two in this distribution. Access to health and social services. I believe that it's interesting to notice that when we look at health services, Brazil has a universal health system, which is spectacular. I think we have to highlight this, that no matter where you are in Roraima, or you are in São Paulo, or in Rio de Janeiro, which are the most developed economic centers of Brazil, you have an evaluation of this access that is very high. Let's see, on time zero, we have about 38% of people who believe the access to health services as being optimal, and 50% consider to be good. So 88% of good and excellent. On time one and time two, the extreme of our scale of assessment goes will grow. On time two, it goes 52% says it is excellent, and good says it is 44%. So it is 96%, almost 97%. Yeah, 96.9% of time two. But it is good to make sure that the access is good, has a good assessment, especially in the city of Boa Vista. With regards to social programs, we have an increase of this access along the route, and it is natural to understand it because the project guarantees from time one a social assistance that will supply those information that are necessary for them to, also in a private fashion, for them to have access to the programs that are available. So we have an increase in that extreme in time two. So we generated a scale from 0 to 10. Through a few techniques of statistical analysis. We took these three variables and they contributed with different weights to this scale that will talk about the autonomy with regards to household and access to social programs. So on time zero, we'll have about 4.7 points in this scale. On time one, it will go to 6.2, and on time two, it will have 8 points. Then in a scale from 0 to 10. A scale from 0 to 10 has 11 points. So along the course, with the increase of the family income, the interiorized will have more success, which will be good in the scale. And with the proper information, they will amplify their access to social programs. Now, with regards to access to school for children from 4 to 17 years, we have a problem. We have a problem. What is happening is, let's remind here, we are in the context of the pandemics. This research was done in July and August. Not all schools had returned to their activities. But beyond this, there are other explanations. We have a number, on time two, a greater number of children who are enrolled in the cities, about 56% of the arrangements. On time two, they have all children at school. But I personally believe to be unacceptable if there is only one out of school. So we'll have on time two, still 28.3% of the families with at least one children at school, and 15.2% no children are at school. And on time zero in Boa Vista, it is a major proportion, about 40% of children out of school. So this is an information that is important, and we try to understand why it was happening. So we went to seek through the in-depth interviews some contextual facts that ask a particular attention to this axis. The municipal education systems are not prepared to receive migrants and refugees. So they lack flexibility to accept and deal with the lack of documentation of this population. The responsibles of AVSI involved in the project, Welcome by Means of Labor, who actually assist these families, they have reports of families which did not want to enroll Venezuelan children, saying that the school had no way to support people who spoke other languages. Besides this, in the context of COVID-19, many schools and daycare units were closed in August, period in which this research was carried out. So remote teaching imposes additional barriers to the participation of this population, be it because of the language or the learning process, or because they had no access or limited access to computer, smartphone, and internet. And in the dimension of social equity or social capital, we worked also using multivariate analysis to generate two scales. One scale that we call the well-being scale, which regards the satisfaction with their lives in Brazil and the level of happiness, and another scale that we call socialization, which has to do with relationships, the increase of the number of relationships, and the level of difficulty to make new friends. So let's see how they scored in these two scales. To score high in the socialization scale means that they are integrating very well and broadening their network of relationships. And to score high in the scale of well-being, it means they are happy and everything is all right. So when we think about the issue of socialization, we had a very high score in all three times, which is a very good news in terms of even in the shelters in Boa Vista at the first moment when they are being integrated to the society with support there. They start creating opportunities of relationships and socialization, be it through courses, professors who go to the shelters to teach them Portuguese or professional qualification, or be it through the opportunities of socialization with other families who are there. But even if the average is high in Boa Vista, we have a growing average with regards to time 2, which is intuitive. On time 2, more people in the household are already working. They are already creating friendships in the labor environment. So the opportunities of generating social capital and relationships will also increase. In the scale of well-being, happiness, and satisfaction, we'll have the lowest averages of this research. We have on time 0 an average of 5.6. On time 1, this average goes up to 6.8, which is slightly higher than on time 2, because on time 1, they just came to the destination city. They are still supported by the project. They have a social assistant who individually gives them full support. They have a house, they have some support, they have a salary, they have their earnings. So this should not be used to pay rent. But when they say that they are happy with their quality of life, they actually refer to the counterfact. That is, how would be my life if I was still in Venezuela? So they feel good because they are in Brazil. They do not regret having migrated, but due to the conditions they live, they are under used. This is generated from this factor analysis. To conclude, we have in these three dimensions, in the economic dimension, which leads all the interactions among the dimensions for integration. In between time 0 and time 2, there is an increase of employability, an increase of income. Former housewives are already working, and there is a higher number of people in the household working. There is a decrease in the distance between the real family income and the projected family income. And about 1/4 of these interiorized families reach a family income that is higher than the basic or the considered necessary for their lives. With the basic rights, with the autonomy of the household and access to health programs and social programs. On time 2, 76% of the families, they get their own household, and 23% of them share with third families. On time 2, there is more access to health and social programs, and because they had access to health programs, which is very important. And on time 2, in which access of children and young youths to school, we still see families with children out of school. Now, with regards to social capital, in this route, we'll see an amplification of the network of relationships with a diversification of socialization more present with Brazilian citizens. In the scale of well-being, which carries this dimension of satisfaction and happiness, it constitutes one only indicator which in this course does not present a significant growth in between time 0 and time 2. Now, the hiring companies, just to a quick look over them. It is a win-win relationship for all involved. And what do the companies say? Because the industry always have vacancies, right? So it is not only this vacancy of 18 Venezuelans that we brought. At the time we had 50 openings and we brought only 18. So we had about 100 openings. We opened the slots not only for Venezuelans but for the whole industry as a whole. And I believe they do have this power of permanence. They know what they want. They came here with an objective, and even with all difficulties, they're always available. They're communicative. They don't have this relationship with the others. They don't place themselves in a different condition. So they're together involved in the process. I think they're skillful, and they become part of the company, especially in the furniture industry. This skill they have is very highlighted. And talking to the companies, the qualitative information is that in between 50 and 75% of these groups, these interiorized groups, per slot of employment, remain in the employment after the 90 days. Now, this is a qualitative information, so it is important to mention that it was this information was collected in 4 companies. Of course, if we do a census in these companies, we can find different statistics. But in these 4 companies in which we worked in depth, the average of permanence is about in between 50 and 70% of the groups. The greater difficulties for them to continue after the 3 months is to find households with rent compatible to the family income. It explains the fact that 23% of the respondents to share the household with other families. And the salaries that were offered go from 11 or 200, 1,200 reais to 1,600 reais. And besides some benefits such as the staple food package that we have in Brazil that is offered as a social benefit. And all of them are hired within the norms of the Brazilian labor legislation. When they assess their route, we'll have in Boa Vista a major expectation among those who await for interiorization. We'll have about 50.9% agreeing that through the interiorization program, I will reach my financial autonomy in no more than 3 months. This is what they believe in Boa Vista on time zero. Through the program of interiorization, I will reach this in no more than 1 year, and 20% will say that I know it might take more than a year to get this financial autonomy, but at least I'll have a job opportunity. So in the city of Boa Vista, the program is idealized, and there is a major expectation for this opportunity. How do you assess your interiorization process by the project Welcome by Means of Labor? Here on time 1 and 2, we'll have 68.6% considered excellent, 27% considered good, which gives a positive assessment of 96.1%, which is exceptional, 2.6% considered regular, and 1.3% did not know how to assess. If you're able to go back in time, 96.1% considered that I would definitely go back to register in the interiorization program. 2% said I would wait a little bit more before I register in the program, and 1.3% said I would stay in Boa Vista, and 0.7% did not answer. How do you see yourself in 5 years? We see this process of interiorization for most of them is irreversible. 83.2% see themselves living in Brazil with a salary that covers the basic expenses of their family. 7.2% Brazil see themselves still living in Brazil with a salary that covers some of their basic expenses, but the earnings will be still insufficient. And 9.6% see themselves going back to Venezuela or going to another country. So in general lines, these are our main results. Thank you very much if I tired you a little bit with my presentation. Thank you, Berta. Well, following with our program, I'd like to invite to our group Gianpaolo Silvestri, the Secretary General of Avsi Brazil Foundation. And as I mentioned before, after this presentation from Berta and about the project, we'll have a round of questions. And the first one I will direct my question is to Mr. Gianpaolo Silvestri. Well, Gianpaolo, the Avsi Foundation works in the migration and refuge on the international scenario. And I have 2 questions related to this. One of them is, what are the elements that you consider a challenge that you noticed today in this field? And besides this, considering the strong articulation of the project Welcome by Means of Work to engage the private sector, what lessons the project Welcome can bring to the international agenda to guarantee local integration of migrants and refugees through labor? Well, I think Avsi Brazil
Primeiramente, eu gostaria de agradecer, parabéns para o trabalho feito. É um trabalho de avaliação bem
done, which attempts to see how we change the life conditions of our benefited after our intervention. And this is not obvious, because this assessment focused especially in the stage of intervention. And we'll go now. This is the first positive aspect. To us at Avsi, working with migrants and refugees in the last years, you can imagine, it becomes more important. Because today we work not only for the Venezuelan refugees, but in Ecuador also, in Somalia, in Kenya, in Congo, in Sudan, in Uganda for the Syrian refugees, in Jordan, in many other countries of Africa. So therefore, we can say that half of our benefited around the world are either refugees or migrants. And all of this is something that thrusts us or foster us to seek new solutions. This before the pandemic, it was a research that brings some terms and assessments. This stimulates the hypothesis of new modes of intervention. Because if on one hand there is the need of the refugees to articulate, they need to be followed up, they need to be supported. On the other hand, it has to do with different topics. The social aspect, as it was evidenced by the research, the cultural and religious aspect. But in many other countries, the religious aspect is very important. The economic aspect, and besides the anthropological issues. So this challenges our mission and our view, because it imposes new challenges to us. So I am here to eyewitness this engagement of Avsi, which shows, and I always try to learn from what they do in the through this learning and sharing, and to question how to improve what we are doing. This is a research that, of course, is food for debate, because we'll try to share it with other people. Another important aspect of this research that I read in the 70-slide version is that somehow it actually meets our methods. It shows how we follow up our benefited along the route, and not only by means of a intervention. This is something that keeps along the time, and sometimes it goes beyond the scope of the project. On the other hand, what was confirmed is that our actions focus on satisfying a need that not always is only of financial or economic character. There is another one. It is not only to guarantee income, but stability, labor stability, family stability in their relationships, and everything that was analyzed in terms of happiness. Of course, it is important to be happy. It is important that these refugees are happy as well. I actually found very interesting the will of helping the benefited depending on their permanence in the new cities, because it allows to go beyond the social impact. And those who were able to get more assistance, or who needs more assistance or further assistance. And I also found very interesting that the benefited or the beneficiary were helped through the language courses. They became more integrated, and they understood these language courses, different from what one can think. This helps them very much to integrate into the society. These two elements are very important to me, because they actually answer another issue of our method. It helps us to to bring closer the specificity of each subject, because people are unique, and therefore the effect of understanding the different interventions and what was the impact of each one of them, it reminds us the need of these people, which is the need of serving them individually. I think that all of this is inside our labor model in our symbol. This is a very complex aspect that was shown by this research. It showed how this impact some of the dimensions of these refugees. It is also interesting that the social impacts and the economic conditions, access to social services, and the conditions of sheltering, it was interesting that the people tried to adequate to their own time markers or time zones to get people or to get their children from school. They really labor shifts to do so. These actually make them protagonists of their own lives, and not they do not act passively. This is actually one of the answers to our questions. The challenge that we have is that we want the refugees to be protagonists and not only passive subjects which receive help. We want them to protagonize their own lives through the development, and all of this is possible only with the promotion of their dignity, their own lives. This is the example that was done by this person who was there. I think it is right for the people to promote their own dignity. They will become protagonists, which is the objective of development. That is, to make people protagonists of their own lives. This is a lesson that Avsi Brazil can teach us, and we can take it to the international debate. That is, the refugees should become protagonists. It is an active function and not a passive function of people receiving help. On the other hand, the research shows other aspects, such as the possibility to perfect our action. Of course, it is part of all researches. And another thing that I found important was the statement of an entrepreneur who says that the deep knowledge of people he has that are part of the project is important in the interpersonal relationships. And I think this is fundamental, because it means that the entrepreneur understood the value of this welcome project. This integration is fundamental. And the role of the private sector is very important. I say this, and I like very much the research that was done. I think the greatest challenge is the capacity to make or to have good experiences as examples on the international context that could be brought to the international level and show how it is fundamental to carry out projects that make the refugees protagonists of their own lives. Under this point of view, Avsi Brazil is, and Avsi Foundation seem to be in the front line. I hope that the committees of the refugees of the U.S. government and the Department of Migration can actually appreciate this project. And the last point about the private sector, that maybe in Brazil the experience of engaging them with the private sector is more advanced with regards to the international scope, especially in the welcoming of the refugees. Other people don't have this strong engagement as we have in Brazil. After 50 years, Avsi will celebrate 50 years in the next year, and we're sure that this development is sustainable only with a series of subjects that act in favor of this. Only if Avsi exists as a multi-stakeholder approach, that is an approach of many people, but each one has to have their own role. That is, the private sector is not limited in there, and they have a good view over the project. This is the contribution that I see to be important for the private sector. And I think we're not talking about changing capitalism. We're talking that the world has changed, and we should adapt to this. In this new world, everyone, the NGOs, for example, the states, the countries, the private sector, and the companies, they might have a fundamental role because there are many opportunities. And I think this is the lesson that I learned here today. The private sector can actually contribute significantly if they keep doing their role of private sector, but with a greater view on a long term. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gianpaolo. Well, our second guest to whom I'm going to ask a question is Joanna from the U.S. Embassy in Brazil. Well, Joanna, our question is regard how adherent do you see this, or how consistent do you see this initiative with the view of the U.S. government in terms of international cooperation, and in special with regards to the BPRM mission of the U.S. government, and which aspects do you highlight related to the process of integration of migrants through employment?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to be here with you today. I have the honor of representing the U.S. Embassy and its consulates here in Brazil. The U.S. government is proud to partner with Avsi, and it appreciates all the efforts to provide assistance to Venezuelan refugees and migrants as they seek to rebuild their lives. I also appreciate the interesting question. President Biden has placed human rights at the center of his administration's foreign policy, affirming that the United States government's commitment to prevent and respond to atrocities globally is a matter of U.S. national security and moral responsibility. One of the many ways this is implemented is through support to refugees and migrants, not only those from Venezuela, but around the world. In the U.S. government, this programming is conducted through two organizations, the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, PRM, at the Department of State, and the Agency for International Development, USAID. I know these get mixed up regularly. While PRM's mission is specifically focused on humanitarian policy and diplomacy in support of humanitarian response, USAID has a broader mission as it seeks to promote and demonstrate democratic values abroad with support to humanitarian crises as one of its pillars. There are three elements of U.S. humanitarian policy, U.S. humanitarian assistance. First is the provision of life-saving assistance. This is the one that most people see on the news. The second is the integration of refugees into their host communities, which is a much less visible effort, but one that makes a life with dignity possible for those who have been uprooted from their homes. The final element is providing support to host governments assisting refugees within their borders. Avsi's programming touches on each of these pillars, but today I'd like to focus on the integration of refugees and migrants primarily. Brazil's approach to the Venezuelan migration crisis has been unique in the region. Operação Acolhida has been very successful in providing Venezuelan individuals and families an option to relocate to areas around Brazil with greater economic opportunity. And the statistics show that their approach is working. As we have seen today and in other studies, Interiorized migrants have higher levels of employment and higher salaries, as well as better access to social services that they are entitled to under Brazilian law. And at least pre-pandemic, there are more children in school. Avsi's programming, built upon Brazil's generous path to legal employment, is part of this success. Avsi's approach to provide support through shelter, job training programs, and Portuguese language classes, while also supporting their efforts to seek employment, has proven successful. The role of work is fundamental in order to meet the needs of Venezuelans in Brazil and to ensure their full social integration. While there's certainly still a need for shelter, food, wash activities, and emergency income, assisting migrants to integrate into their local communities is another key aspect. Integration not only allows Venezuelan families to financially support themselves, but builds bridges between Venezuelans and the Brazilian communities where they live. This is an important step in helping Venezuelans to commit to their new homes and can help to reduce tensions between Brazilian residents and immigrants. The U.S. government is proud to support projects that expand employment of Venezuelans, as well as to encourage entrepreneurship. We have invested both PRM funds through Avsi and other organizations, as well as through USAID through its Oportunidades program to support these efforts. Additionally, I want to mention that we've seen communities across Brazil implementing the city certification programs to best support Venezuelan arrivals. We recognize as well the importance of assisting migrants to have their educational degrees verified so that those with professional and technical qualifications can work in their own professional fields. And while I think some of the data showed that those degrees don't matter, I think a huge portion of this is that those degrees have not been officially recognized. The U.S. government will continue to encourage the international community to provide financial support to Venezuelan refugees and migrants and seeks to lead by example. Last week, PRM announced an additional $247 million in humanitarian assistance and $89 million in economic and development assistance to respond to the needs of vulnerable Venezuelans, both inside and outside of Venezuela's borders. In Brazil, this brings the U.S. contribution supporting Venezuelan migrants in this fiscal year 2021, including contributions from USAID, to $38.6 million. And part of this commitment includes funding for Avsi as it begins the second phase of its integration project. We are exceptionally pleased to celebrate that as well today. The U.S. continues to hope that the political situation in Venezuela will find a peaceful resolution and that Venezuelans across the region will be able to return to their homes. Until then, though, the U.S. stands with Brazil and our other partners, as well as the international organizations and the numerous NGOs working to support Venezuelans wherever they may be. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Thanks.
Muito obrigada, Joana.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Well, now I will launch a question to another guest, Mr. José Egas. José, how important is to seek social economic integration of refugees and migrants from Venezuela by means of interiorization, and what are the benefits of hiring refugees? Hello. Well, thank you, Thais. First, I'd like to thank the Avsi Brazil and Foundation Avsi and Bertha and Polis. We are long-time partners, and we hope to continue with this type of studies and processes, support and projects for many years in Brazil and in the rest of Latin America. And when you talked about the projects in Ecuador, I am from Ecuador, and when Fabricio said that Avsi had the idea of opening new rooms, it was a pleasure not only to listen to it, but to share it with my colleagues in Ecuador. this process, because this process does not affect only Brazil, but affects the whole Latin America. We're almost 6 million refugees from Venezuelan migrants that fled their countries, and they have gone to Brazil and many other neighboring countries. We're talking about significant numbers. The closing of the before the closing of the borders, we had more than 600,000 Venezuelans in Brazil, from which at least 260,000 are still in Brazil. And these numbers are before the pandemics. After the pandemic, we can be talking about maybe 40,000, 50,000 Venezuelan citizens who are in the country, besides those 260,000 that were before, until March of 2020. Now, trying to answer your question, or your questions. Economic integration is one of the most important stages of the life of those who were forced to fled their own country because of conflict. We need to remember that when someone flees their country, they have to seek international protection, and that person loses all their fundamental rights, their right to choice. These people leave everything behind, and they have to seek in another country this protection that no longer they can receive in their original country. And when they come to a country such as Brazil, this socio-economic integration does not start in the destination city. It starts at the boundaries, at the border. And Brazil has this Operation Welcome, which has three fundamental pillars. The first one is the documentation and order in the border. When someone comes to Brazil, Brazil offers this protocol of solicitation of refugee status. They offer them the documentation without which no one would have access to public services that all of us, foreigners or nationals, are entitled to have here. The second pillar is humanitarian essence, as Joanna mentioned. A person with a high degree of vulnerability, when they come to Brazil or to country, they need some sort of support, especially if they don't have enough condition to stabilize. So they need to recover, they need vaccination, they need access to health, they need education. And I share with Berta, a child out of school is unacceptable. But the country within the laws, they combine all of us, foreigners or nationals, and we have this access here. And this Operation Welcome tries to do it. We're 150 partners, federal government, state government, municipal government, private companies, the academy, NGOs, all partners are the UN system. We all try to reach this, or to facilitate this assistance. And this assistance would not happen without the support of the donors, the governments. And this is the government of the US, Italy. All of them, all of us are together in this process. And as Berta said, the conditions in Boa Vista are very difficult conditions. They have very little capacity to integrate socially and economically a large number of people who come to Brazil. And Brazil, as the third pillar of integration, has made the difference. I remember I was in Greece in 2015 with the major arrival of Syrians to Greece, and Europe was trying to do what Brazil is doing now. And you have already done with 60,000 people the distribution of the refugees that come to the country to all states of the Federation. More than 750 municipalities in which this interiorization program allowed these people voluntarily could leave the city of Boa Vista and restart their lives in better conditions, both with access to services and possibilities of labor. So in this moment is when people start having this financial autonomy, which makes this interiorization important. I don't have this capacity to self-sustain. I am still without this choice, the choice to choose and decide about my life. That's why the interiorization process is very important. The project Welcome by means of labor does this follow-up and allows this person, before they leave the Boa Vista until they reach their destination city, and during the integration with the private company, they can be supported. We as ACNUR at this moment, we have about 800 vacancies daily used for the process of interiorization through partners such as EHB and other partnerships that we have with Avsi. But as Berta said in the study, interiorization makes the difference. It allows these people to get this socio-economic integration in a definitive way, and they are able to come to have a long-lasting solution. Without this long-lasting assistance from all actors that are part of this approach of the society as general that was mentioned in the first answer, the situation of Brazil would not be the same. I think all of us have to be very proud for what we have done. We have still a lot to do. We always have gaps. We always need to cover some needs. But what we have done and what we'll keep doing together will make a difference. Sorry. Now, with regards to the benefits of hiring refugees, I always believe that the refugee or a person who has the same rights as anyone in Brazil. If the person has the documents, or a person who is accepted or sheltered welcomed by the country, this person is not competing, as Berta said, it is not competing or receiving employment specifically for Venezuelans. These are people who are capable, who are knowledgeable, who have experiences. They are here in Brazil as any one of us, seeking employment in companies which actually do have their needs. I remember as a representative in 2018, I went to Caritas in São Paulo. Inside Caritas offices, there is a billboard that said, in 2017, the number of Brazilians who left Brazil only in 2017 was 350,000 people. This is more than all refugees that came into Brazil in the last few years. That is, Brazil always have this movement. Many people flee Brazil. And the arrival of these people in regular situation allows the market to flow. But now we have to consider that a refugee might enrich the labor market because they do have knowledge, they have qualifications. And they have cultural baggage, different professional profiles and educational profiles. I talked about the language, but it is also important to mention the finality. A person that comes to restart their life is a person who has a lot of appreciation for this new opportunity they are receiving. I don't come to a job to seek another one. I come to a job to restart my life. And in this commitment that I have with this company, with the country that welcomes me, I try to incentivize my colleagues and my peers, be them national or foreigners, to contribute with this opportunity. And this refugee or migrant will also bring these innovative ideas that in other countries happen in Brazil, make things to flow in a different way. In my opinion, the arrival of people and the hiring of people have a lot of benefits, besides the fact that the company is considered as a company which has some social commitments. But thank you. Thank you, Jose. So your answer is very much connected to the next question I will ask, directed to Diogo from Macrodex Construction and Incorporation. It is a partner of our project. They hired 12 Venezuelans, and they are in the process of hiring a few others. Well, Diogo, we know that the private sector has a fundamental role that we mentioned in the integration of these refugees and migrants from Venezuela, where they offer employment. But we know that these hirings, they begin from the sensitivity of the people who are behind the desks in the companies. I would like you to share, how do you see this experience of hiring Venezuelan migrants and refugees, and how does it connect to the motivation at Macrodesk? Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank Avsi for the invitation to participate. I see it to be very important for us facing the society to expose what we're doing in our social commitment. The company has always done this. I will talk about our company's story. We have about 34 years of history, always in civil construction. We had a part of the company was dedicated to trading construction goods, but in 2014 we started doing this social commitment, in which we received a group of migrants from Haiti. Not in the same way, they were not refugees, but they were people with the same objective. They sought a new life. They developed, many of them actually brought their families. And the company acts always in this field of incorporation, public works, building hospitals, penitentiaries and schools. These are some segments of our actions. Always seeking to do our role towards society, which is one of the pillars of sustainability, right? Our social commitment has an economic side, because we seek to evolve, and we open our doors, and we were very well received by Avsi. We came to a world we did not know, but to meet our demand of labor, it was very good. So we do have some difficulties to find qualified labor, and we welcomed our colleagues. They are our colleagues from Venezuela. They became part of our company now. And we saw in their eyes that that will to that very difficult thing that we need, the will to succeed, the will to prosper, facing our colleagues from Brazil. And some of the Brazilians did not have. So a furnished house, some help with regards to food supply until they get their financial independence. And also, our city welcomed these colleagues very well. Before their arrival, we involved our public administration, the city hall, and the Secretary of Health and Secretary of Education, so we could prepare our city for their arrival. So we developed a project with these two secretariats, which is a registration in the our universal health system. There are other Venezuelans coming, not through Avis, but the husband came, so they bring other family members also. And in our selection process, we seek people who are willing to bring their families, because it is easier to make them happy. When the family is present, it ends up giving us some comfort, some security, because they bring their families, they bring their spouse and their children. And it is very positive for Avsi, because we try to open our doors for them too. We know that, look, if the father of the family is there, maybe they can last there for 3 or 4 months until they decide to go back to their original country. And when they have their family with us, they decide to stay. It is very important. So in our company, we did this 12 hirings. We do have a project ongoing to hire more Venezuelans. And we don't want to stop here. We are very happy with what was presented to us in terms of profiles. They actually met our demands. And now, as it was said, the cost with rental and their autonomy, our city has a higher cost of rental. So it is our role as a company to assess all these attributions, and each one of our colleagues that we hired were helped to place them better inside our plans of salaries and earnings. They started about 2 months ago. And from then on, we have been evaluating them so that we can then fit them into every category of attributions and salaries. Thank you, Diogo. Well, now, our last participant, to whom I will ask a question, Barbara from the Ministry of Citizenship. Barbara, the Ministry of Citizenship coordinates 2 sub-federal committees of welcoming and interiorization, and they have a key role in the strategy of interiorization of Operation Welcome, in articulation with other ministries, states, municipalities, civil society, and UN agencies. How do you see the impact of this multi-sectorial approach, mentioned previously, that was adopted by the federal government in the integration of refugees and migrants from Venezuela in Brazil? Hi. Well, multi-sectoriality is a key point of the working of Operation Welcome, because we're thinking about a structure of governance. We do have a federal committee of emergency assistance focused on the migration, and it is composed by the several ministries, just as in a chief of staff. Maybe he needs only sheltering, but we know that they also need access to public policies in several fields. So this migrant needs to access our health system. They need to access the labor market, education. So we understand there is no way to treat this issue within a perspective that is unique in only one area. It was very clear to us when we received the first Venezuelans in the state of Roraima, that the structuring of this committee has to answer. Parallel to this, we felt the need of creating the subcommittees. As you said, we do have the subcommittee of welcome and the subcommittee of interiorization, and another subcommittee in the health field. These are spaces where we can discuss actions. We need to check what is the next procedure, how we're going to operate the Operation Welcome itself. So the Ministry of Defense acts in the logistics, especially in the borders, but we also have structures in there. When you think that there is a trial station in which we're going to issue documents and they're going to be sent to other public policies or sheltering services, and there will be special protection for them. We need to talk about multi-sectoriality. So the structure in there is, we have 14 shelter centers, and in each one of these in these units, because of our partnerships and the role of ACNUR is fundamental. We have an agreement of technical cooperation with ACNUR that makes possible to manage these equipments, which have more than 8,700 Venezuelans already sheltered. Besides this, we have entities and organizations that can be executing these services inside or on site. With the project Welcome, They do have the possibility of having the courses of Portuguese language, which we believe to be one of the main barriers for them. The issue of capacity building for the labor world is fundamental for the migrant to be inserted into the Brazilian society in general. And when we talk about interiorization, as all of you mentioned, the interiorization, indeed, it is a differential of Operation Welcome. And we say that above all, we need to talk to our partners in the places, because this migrant will come, and we have several modes of support and shelter, beginning with the dimension of labor, this the articulation with the companies. And we also have other modes of interiorization. For example, we have specific models of sheltering. For example, this they go to from one shelter in the borders and go to another shelter. And for you to fly these people from one place to another, we need to articulate with the Brazilian Air Force to make available one airplane. And we have to use the army infrastructure, which will take these migrants to the destination cities. And besides that, our partners, for example, in the field of civil assistance, we need to talk to the managers of those shelters, CREAS, as well as in the health units. They'll have to alert the health stations with regards to the arrival of these migrants. It is fundamental. Without multi-sectoriality, we're not able to do our work. And this research that we saw today will give us the dimension of what we need to improve. When Professor Berta shows the issue of education, that we do have a barrier that we need to act upon, this is a role of our subcommittees. We need to show for the municipal administrators that we already have ways to help them to get documentation, school documentation, and we can actually help them. So the Operation Welcome is only possible because of these partnerships, this joint thought. Thank you, Barbara. Well, we just finished our round of questions. I will now ask to come to the stage Fabrizio Pellicelli, Director of Avsi Brazil, to issue a few words and the final conclusion. Well, good morning, everyone. I will very briefly try to pinpoint some elements of this interesting debate. I thank Berta for her provocation, because I understand that this study actually can provoke an important discussion among so many actors involved in the Operation Welcome, and to have a solid scientific study that can actually yield major effects in the interior of Brazil and the committees of interiorization of the federal government. I would like to pinpoint a few key words that I understand to have arrived today. They were actually dealt by all speakers. First of all, I think that a central point of this experience, or this multi-actor approach, is to recognize that the humanitarian response of this dimension cannot be done by only one actor. I think this is a point that marked very much the presence of Avsi Brazil, together with our partners, because it recognizes that a person to be able to come to autonomy needs a set of services. We talked about happiness. Happiness is something that is major. happiness needs to have a set of actors, each one with their own mission and their function to contribute for the well-being of these people. But Operation Welcome, which is the program that gathers all of this, has an element that interested Avsi from the beginning, because it is structured as a program that guarantees a route of integral or whole human development. We mentioned no more than following up a person during their path all the way to their autonomy. Our Secretary General mentioned this. This is the core of our organization, to follow up the people to be protagonists of their own lives. So this intuition, this rationale that was mentioned by Jose, especially in the scenario of a humanitarian emergency, is something that is important to our organization. As a second point, I am an Italian who lives in Brazil for many years. Brazil actually has a regulatory framework for this, and Jose mentions it is very progressist. It is not possible to see everything that we saw to be only one law on migration that really guarantee this view of local integration. This is a unique factor, and this is an inheritance of Brazil. This is a concrete demonstration of solidarity for our Venezuelan neighbors and other people who come to Brazil. And this allows a company, as was very well mentioned, to be an actor, because they are within a rationale to help promote and regularize this path. The third point, that means within this major alliance of many actors, the presence of an organization such as Avsi and many other NGOs such as Migration Institute and Human Rights, which is our partner. What is our role? Because each one is in this alliance with a common objective and distinctive roles. I understand that what Avsi and other organizations might place here is the center, the core of our mission, is the passion we have for these people. It is not our technical competence. You are ACNUR and the UN, governments, city halls, all organizations of international cooperation are much more prepared than us. But what we can do is to lend you this passion for the people, to be a human or humane companion. And I think this is an element of great value, because Operation Welcome generated subsidiary models which it is the last mile of the human contact, which is a responsibility of many organizations of the civil society in this country. Together with all other actors, allow this human relationship, be it in the border, be it in the shelters, be it in the process of promoting talents, be it in the integration in the sheltering city. I think this is an element of great value that contribute to value this multi-sectorial action. But another element, and I believe to be the only element on the international scenario, as Gianpaolo said, it is the role of the companies. This role, this route in Brazil of the companies, with this social point of view, with this social responsibility, knowing where to act, is a nice element in this experience. And Brazil, in this regard, is indicating a very solid path, not only with regards to economic, but this is a social responsibility with the communities as an articulator in this regard. This has enormous value. And what I think to be a synthetic element that is very highlighted in Bertha's presentation, that provoked me very much in the last few months, is to notice that in this famous time 2, which is the time where people are going to be more alone, where the whole Operation Welcome will disconnect from them. These people demonstrate the data in which they are able to organize themselves, to become protagonists of their own lives, to start solutions for their problems or to restart their lives. This is an element of enormous value for the development and integration of our organization, because this is what we seek. And I think that Bertha's research demonstrates this very clearly. And Avsi is very happy to be able to follow up this beginning. We know how difficult it is and how what else we have to do. But these are human subjects that want to restart their lives. And last but not least, I will mention one point of our experience of one and a half years when we started, when PRM actually gave us this responsibility. This is the fear of, in the scope of the pandemic, not to be able to answer to this challenge, because everything we showed now was done during the pandemic. So I think it is important that Avsi Brazil and Foundation Avsi and the Institute Migrations, we were very audacious in not retrieving, because within 15 months of pandemic we did all of this. This is an element that we need to weigh, because when we're just coming out of this pandemic, when our economies go back to growth, it shows the potential of interiorization model and how much we can do. This is a point that I want to mention and conclude, because I want to thank very much our team at Avsi Brazil and our operation partners, because we didn't retrieve. We need to be present for these people in all our presence, in the borders, in the management of the shelters, together with the company, together with the Ministry of Citizenship. We need to be present in the stage of promotion of the courses. We need to continue present in interiorization. This is really what makes me very happy, because indicates that our mission to be with people was fulfilled within a very difficult moment that was this pandemic. So I want to thank this major alliance, including the U.S. government, for the opportunity. Without this, it would be impossible to make all this effort. Our allies, ACNUR and the UN agencies, and the Avsi Foundation, which supports us very much, and the Institute Migrations and Human Rights, which is not only a great partner, but I want to highlight it was a major support for us in our route. And all of you for being here, dedicating your time and your expertise to deal with this topic. Thank you very much. Thank you, Fabricio. Well, very emotional to remember all this course, and knowing that we're still going to do it for 2 more years. So thank you very much to the U.S. government for this opportunity. Well, we came to the end of our event. I would like to thank you for your company, and I'd like to leave you with an invitation. From September 30th, next Thursday, we'll have a photograph exhibition of all our job here, all our work. It is a photography expo that is being done by Avsi Brazil, together with the Avsi Foundation, federal government, and many other partners of the project, which illustrates this course that we saw here by means of real stories. People who fled Venezuela, came into Brazil through the border with Roraima, and started seeking opportunities to restart their lives. This will be open from September 30th to October 31st in the Cultural Center, Banco do Brasil, in between 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So please, I invite you all, or those who come to Brasilia, if you have the opportunity to visit this expo, it will be beautiful. And once again, I would like to thank you all for your presence, virtual and presential here, and wish you a good day.